Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fighter Pilot's Guide to Living. We are here again for another fantastic installment with ODA 595 and VF-213. We are picking up from last episode where we were talking about the strafing run that Tung and Biff conducted to support ODA 595 on the ground while they were troops in contact. And we're going to talk about the aftermath of that. And I think picking up with 213, Chip, Tong, who wants to go there with coming back to the boat and what it was like when you trapped and the D-arm folks saw the jet?
I'll start off, and then Tung can give you his impression. First of all, we a lot of the some of the info had made it back to to the intel on board the ship, but it didn't make it to the flight deck. And of course, we come into the break, into the overhead, and trap. And when we're coming out of the landing area into the D arm, is when they first had an opportunity to see it. Because obviously the gun's on the left, and as soon as we spun around about 60 to 70 degrees and taxi over the D arm, there was a great deal of excitement because they saw the nose of the airplane was covered with soot from the exhaust of the gun. Get out of the airplane, and they're just high five, and it was like a big, it was their Super Bowl. I mean, it was, they never expected something like that, or the use of the gun, and in this scenario, but quite exciting. And then everybody ended up, we posed for pictures once we got the airplane spotted, and you're shaking your head, Tongue. You were in a couple of those pictures, I think. But we had Gunner Lavoie, who I often kidded that he was the second best gunner in the Navy. But and God rest his soul, we lost him actually to an accident in Pensacola. Very sad. But yep, the so quite exciting. And over to you. Your thoughts, Tom?
Yeah, obviously the very first thing was to go get gas because we were hanging around as long as we could and going down low altitude to do a bunch of strafing runs will put you behind the gas ladder. But yeah, same thing. I remember landing, but I don't quite remember the exuberance by Gunnar Lavoie. I remember as soon as we spun off, he was back looking at me, giving me grief because we had put out so much of that bull IR, and it just just bakes the horizontal tails. It takes all the paint off of them, and they didn't like us to even check it because then they'd have to go refill the thing. There were 160 packs per rail, and he's over there giving me the what the hell did you do, because you put
Yeah,
out a bunch of this stuff. And I tried to give him the finger signals of guys walking with a gun, and I think that's when he finally looked and saw the soot up around the gun, and then he was like,
yeah.
"Holy
Both
smokes!"
both end both ends of the airplane looked like it was on fire.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing was just soot covered between the infrared expendables and just the exhaust that comes out of the gun. I made the mistake after we landed and popped out. I said, "Wait, man, you guys have got to see this tape," because I had thrown the FLIR, the targeting pod out there. You could just kind of cue it to the HUD, and there was some great, just imagery of rounds landing and kind of sparkling amongst a bunch of guys and things. And unfortunately, what I forgot was, although I saw that in the cockpit, when you pull the trigger, I think Biff had mentioned, it's set up in the Tomcat so that it goes to your heads up display. So we got this beautiful run of guys running every which way as we come down, and it goes to a washed out HUD for about 10 seconds, and then you see nothing. So unfortunately, I couldn't bring that footage back for the Orties. But as Biff mentioned, they lived for that stuff. And
Yeah,
you got to understand the Tomcat at the time. We were the last ones to launch. We were the first ones down. That thing lived on the back of our maintainers. And but for the folks getting out there turning wrenches, the Orties, the electronics folks, the airframe folks, that was the only thing that was getting us to and from the war. And even in the F-14D, which we flew, the latest and greatest version, I would say we were probably 85% mission capable on any given day. Something wasn't working and something was taped together, but everything we did was on the back of our maintainers.
absolutely. I think the HUD issue, or really wasn't an issue. The airplane was designed for air to air, so you want to see that footage out the front of the airplane. Obviously, if we had had time, it'd be nice to have been able to keep it, with the flare image that Tung had been painted so beautifully. But yeah, we were really excited when we got back. But it went to the HUD and it was very, not very visible what was.
And Chip, I think we made a bigger deal, or if either one of you guys remember, did you guys have to go talk to CAG after that since you guys went below, or since you had the approval, was everybody on the up and up?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, we had clearance, and in fact, we had asked for it before we went down. It wasn't that big of a deal on this one, but TC kind of made a habit of, um, I wouldn't say giving me a hard time. He liked to tweak me, so it was we had a great relationship when we were outside of the wearing the uniform, but on the ship it was a whole different ball game.
And then Nate, do you remember from an intel perspective, obviously, if, when guys going below the floor and below potentially in a mad pad, was there any increase in trying to figure out, what man pads were there or what if that threat was real, or I guess what was the spin up in intel after that event?
Yeah, I think as mentioned earlier, we deployed. I think we were one of the first deployers, Tom, with FTI, fast tactical imagery. So like now, 25 years later, it must seem very quaint to talk about what a big deal it was to get imagery in near real time back to the boat and look at it. And so, there was no Navy Sea School for imagery analysis of FTI, right? And so we kind of made that up as we went along within the Intel Center on the Carl Vinson. And so yes, we would hear about and already have the Rios would send back via FTI footage, and being able to kind of get a sense of what was going on the ground, and try to overlay that with what we're hearing from the KAOC and that sort of thing was very, very interesting. But nothing compared to when they actually got there and the crew saw it, and then of course they would come into Civic for the debrief, and we were passing all that on within minutes back to the main KAOC as well. So it was really, really exciting to play with the FTI during workups. I think we got it Tung like maybe 5 months before we deployed or something like that, and we were just like playing around with it during workups, and we ended up employing it quite a bit and distributing that. It wasn't getting to the guys on the ground, but I do know it was getting back to the boat and it was getting back to the KAOC, so that they could have a sight picture of what was going on.
Super cool. So, what about the ground perspective on all this? Now you've gotten the strafing run. How effective was it from the ground, and what happened next, Paul and Mike, as you're still dealing with the Taliban in this engagement?
As they dropped their bombs first, we picked up our belongings and ran off the backside of the hill.
The few belongings.
Yeah, few belongings. We'll get to that, Mike. As we're running off, Matt was talking to you with the radio, and as we're running away, I heard your guns come in and thought, well, that's nice. Sounds close. Good for them. Keep running faster. And we ran down the hill as you guys engaged, pretty much not looking back till we were down at the bottom of the hill, and very grateful we didn't see the Taliban on top of the hill, because they would have had their high ground on us and we'd been in real trouble. We then moved back to the position that we'd been in first thing in the morning and took off eyes on that hilltop, or that end of that ridge that you had just bombed for us. And in my mind, I was really upset, because typically in the Army, if I call in artillery and I call in troops in the open as part of my call for artillery, the artillery knows automatically to do a proximity fuse. And the proximity fuse just destroys troops in the open. And we had trouble getting, because of the hilly terrain, getting good bomb. You'd miss long or short because it'd go over the top of the hill or it'd hit short on the hill, and being able to clear hilltops. And when the Taliban, the few guys that were left, were on top of that hill that we had been on, and I was very upset because we couldn't get proximity fuse. And I asked Matt to ask the B-52 that showed up. Well, ask him if he can go proximity. And of course, Matt had to call up and ask him. And their weapons guy came back and said, yes, the JDAMs can do proximity. And while I'm figuring that out, Mike is looking through the scope at the hilltop, watching the guys on the hilltop. Your cue, Mike.
Sorry, I'm going to keep this about as clean as I can. So as we're watching, and I'm on my scope, as I said, we had very few, the Northern Alliance counterparts that were with us. They took pretty much all our equipment and horses and everything else, and then bitched to us about how heavy our stuff was, and we went down the hill, linked up with them, set everything back up as Paul said. I looked through the scope. Matt is trying to remember where we were at, and I see a Taliban eating my freaking MRE. At the time, prior to a lot of this starting, I had an MRE out. I think I was eating peanut butter and crackers, whatever the hell it was, and it was out there. And fast forward, we get down there, we set things back up, and the son of a bitch is eating my freaking MRE, and I completely lost my mind.
His one and only for the day.
Yeah, and Matt finally, he remembered. Matt was really, really anal about where we were at. So I was like, God damn it, you have the 10-digit grid, the elevation and everything else where we were at. He's like, yeah, that's right. So he calls it in, and I'm on the soft lam, and actually Paul later on was just, he was talking to people. I'm on the soft lam, and I laze the guy eating my freaking MRE. And Paul's like, I have no clue what Mike was saying. It sounded like he was chanting to the devil, but I was so enraged when I saw the guy sitting on the freaking, some random rock up there, eating my MRE. I lost my mind. I was just, now mind you, that was probably my, the start of my very angry years. Andy Marshall, or Intel Sergeant, told me weeks prior while we were training in Fort Campbell that I was not allowed to talk on the radio because I went off on the range guy that wouldn't open the range for us, and I gave him some, if you're too fucking lazy, come and be our road guard. We got a train. We're getting ready to leave, and if you're too fucking lazy, you can come be our road guard. And so Andy was like, I cannot talk on the radio, and so I was chanting to the devil as the guy was eating my MRE, and of course the bombs dropped. And like we said earlier, the last podcast, how big the cone gets, but I was like, I give a damn. He was right in the crosshairs. And as you all know, as the rounds come in, it sounds like a damn train. You could hear it. And the last thing I remember is the dude looking up as he's holding my MRE. He looks up and there was nothing left. I swear to God, there was nothing left. 2 proximity fused rounds, and there was nothing left. Yes. And all, our Northern Alliance guys started cheering and chanting and Allah Akbar, and I was like, go get our freaking hell that you lost because you left us on the top of the hill with the high ground, so go get us our hill back.
Oh my
That was
goodness.
the clean version. That was the clean version.
man, I really like the texting version.
Hell hath no fury like someone who ate Mike's MRE.
Yeah, I'll never touch your food, Mike. That's for sure. Mark, there was some point in
Sorry,
here.
I gotta add, we met Donald Rumsfeld when we got back to K2, and they asked me to tell them the story without cursing. And Matt was actually like, that's the best part of the whole story. You know, Mike can't tell the story without cursing. If he ain't cursing, we can't do that. You know, so trying to tell the story, I was a very angry man. And as you read the Robin Moore book, and he puts down that Paul, Matt, and I were singing the Ballad of the Green Beret after this. Paul was like, no, all I ever heard Mike say was, fuck you, fuck this, I'm going to kill you, motherfucker. That's.
I like that version better. It just sounds so much more somewhere much more earthy. Mark, I feel like there was a point in here, right, that you came to help because you couldn't hear from Paul and Mike anymore. Where in the battle was that part? And can you tell that part of the story?
Yeah, it was I can understand Mike being angry and upset. We were living like Apaches, as they said. We were pretty light, and then redefined light, and then went with half of that. And anytime you cracked a meal, you had instant friends. So we lost 20, 25 pounds of body weight in that first month. And so having a little bit of a calm meal and a bite of something was, that little moment of recovery. But so I know all the sailors, you got steak and fresh lobster every night, right? But at the point with this particular incident, trying to describe, so Paul's Tiger 02 Charlie cell, they were to our north, they had our flank, but they had enemy to their front, then targets to their front that they'd been working on earlier that morning. I was co-located with the Bravo cell to their south. So both of us are kind of in a north-south line, north of the Amudarya Canyon. South of the canyon, and then west of us, we had our Tiger 02 Delta cell, and then way south of the canyon and further west of us, was the Alpha cell. So we were kind of spread out in that configuration. So I was, at the time, I was with Will Summers, and I were the C2 cell at that point, the two-man cell that was with the leaders. We were co-located with our chief warrant officer and his Bravo cell, and supporting the main effort attack kind of down the road with two different Afghan commanders there, Lal and Kamal and their forces. So as we're sharing aircraft with who has priority of fires based on the targets in front of them that they're reporting, we got control of that aircraft on our position and started to work targets to our front. And then it was, handed back over to the 2 Charlie cell because of what they had. Somewhere in there, we observed an enemy element moving, kind of from our front center, but moving out of position to attack the proximity, the area where the 2 Charlie cell was at. And I could see that. So we were trying to call and warn them of it, that it was coming. I think they were already keenly aware of it. And then could hear the radio calls of the danger close and dropping the bombs. And then, saw it impact. We could visually see it from our position. but then somehow in there, we no longer had the radio comms either with 2 Charlie. And I was like, all right, we gotta go. And so Will, Sergeant Summers and I got, I don't know, maybe 20 militia on horseback. That was our QRF to get over there. But getting over there literally at the gallop, still trying to raise them on the radio, probably took us 30 to 40 minutes, honestly. As we're moving, trying to get to a hilltop, stop, pause briefly, collect up the rest of our force, because I wanted to make sure we were kind of consolidated in case we ran into a fight. I didn't know what we were going to have, especially the closer we got to them, and we didn't, still weren't able to raise them on the radio. But the other cues were, we can hear the jets, the F-14s coming down, and then we hear the distinct 20 millimeter rip, multiple times. Got to observe it once, kind of from a hill vantage point. Couldn't see exactly where the rounds were impacting, but I could, see the jet low, and it's doing what it was obviously being asked to do. So again, throughout this, I'm like, we've lost some guys potentially. Got to get over there, sense of urgency. So Will and I are out front of our force trying to encourage them along, as I said. And as we got closer and closer, we finally could get in the right spot and on the right, hear him again, and was able to make contact with Paul, and reported that we were about a ridge or so away from him yet, in that terrain, and then could ease up a little bit, and come up and met him. This is right after they had employed that Mike had, then the bombs came back in again, had taken care of the hilltop that they had recently vacated. And at the time we rode into the position, their soft land was set up, and Mike and Matt and Paul were there and dealing with the local leaders. I ran into the local Afghan group first, further behind them, and they led us right up to where Paul was at, and got a quick debrief and update, and gave them, so glad to see him, because again, there's several moments throughout this. This is just one of many where I'm like, this is how it ends. This is going to be the first of us killed throughout this. And it was a good day, because they weren't, with that, thank God. And they were able to, we resupplied them, gave them the last bit of water and batteries and stuff that we had that Will and I could spare. And then we, rode, we spent maybe half hour to an hour there with them while they started to move, and the Northern Alliance was starting to move to recapture the hilltop that had been the earlier post. And then we Will and I returned back to where we were at originally.
And Mark, that's a great point, and I think you guys actually gave us a little more ammo as well. But I think as we look at this, and just the like I said, they took a lot of our equipment when they retrograded back before Paul, Matt, and I, and the one PK gunner with his 20 rounds or whatever he had. I think it was a come to Jesus moment between us and our partners of TTPs and why we do the things we do. They said they took our equipment and had a nice discussion with one of them about why we do the things we do. He was basically complaining that he was carrying our heavy equipment, which was a go bag, scat bag, whatever you want to call it, and want to know why we do the things we do. And I think it was a great moment looking back at it now of coming together and explaining, tactics, techniques, procedures, how they do things versus what we do, and coming to a little bit agreement as we move forward on what probably is the best way to go about doing operations in those type of environments.
I got a quick question. About casualties. I know you guys didn't sustain any. I know you're prepared to take care of yourselves. Did you get involved with any of the forces there and treating casualties?
I would say it was Paul. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Mark and Alpha Team had already moved forward. There were a couple times where Steve Bly helped while we were still around LZ Albatross, and then when we got into Missouri Sharif, actually there was a lot of hands-on training that Steve Bly and Bill Bennett had us go through as far as assisting with different medical procedures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We did two kinds of medical. We treated our Northern Alliance, and we also sent our senior medic over to treat the Taliban prisoners, and he was gathering intelligence as he was doing so. When you ask about it, we had one incident within the first week we were there that was unique. Is we had moved up to Dostum's headquarters up on the hilltop with Mark, and the whole team was together for a night. And one of Dostum's leaders had gotten wounded the day prior. And we were scheduled to get a helicopter was coming in to drop off the two Air Force TAC-Ps. And Dostum asked us if we could put his wounded guy onto the helicopter and fly his wounded guy to Uzbekistan to be treated. That had never been covered with any of our orders. So I sent the guys out to move the horses because the horses were actually pegged down to where the helicopter was going to land. Mark went to talk to Dostum. Everybody's doing everything, and I was on the radio trying to call back to Karshi Khanabad to get permission to put this guy on the helicopter, because we had no permission to do that. And usually when you're talking on the radio, you're talking to a radio operator in the group commo section. He takes a note, says, wait one, comes back with an answer. Well, that night I called, and within minutes, the group commander, Colonel Mulholland, answered the phone. And for probably the next 15 minutes, he started discussing me the geopolitical ramifications of an unauthorized person flying in a Army helicopter to a third country to be treated, and that he had no approval and he didn't know how the Geneva Convention. And I was like going, sir, yes, no, yes, no. That's all I need. And lucky for us, the wind shifted and the clouds dropped and the helicopter could not land, and it flew off without landing. So we didn't have that. That could have been a very dicey thing if we could not put that wounded man on that helicopter.
And I don't want to get into anything classified or anything, but when you guys talk, is that something you deal with in training of obviously asking big ass like that from one of your cohorts? If you have to say no, is there a way that you message that, or is it just, hey man, deal with it when it comes and you'll figure it out?
It's do the best you can.
Yeah, that was something that we did not cover, in planning. In that, so we had that situation where Dostum is asking, this is one of his main commanders, and he was pretty adamant. He was like, I know you got a helicopter coming tonight. This commander's critical. He had just been wounded in a fight, earlier that day, and wants him evac'd. we were worried it was going to cause a loss of rapport, because he was asking repeatedly, can I put this guy, on the helicopter? And it turned out, we were able to avoid the incident. Maybe we were more keen to it, or I was more keen to it, maybe. That Steve or whoever was there medically was trying to stabilize this guy, but this was a General Dostum mask to put him on the helicopter. What if it had been General Dostum himself, where it was a key leader of the resistance? That might have been a different outcome or answer, but you had to deal with sensitive questions and things like that as well. Here we got a resupply, we got 2 additional personnel, those JTACs coming in. That 160th aircraft has flown hours to get to us, and they literally are feet from us. I seem to recall they had a major brownout and clipped a wheel or something. And in that terrain, we were in rough terrain, on a side of a mountain where they were trying to come in at. And they did all they could. But that aircraft waved off that night, and it resolved the situation. Once I told General Dostum of it couldn't land, then he was kind of, okay, I understand. He was adamant. He was like, just get my guy to Uzbekistan, to your military hospital, and my people in Uzbekistan will come and get him. That was his network, from adjacent countries and his relationship with their leadership. So back to your original question of casualties. Yes, our team had cross-trained. That was part of our culture, to cross-train extensively. It was Paul held the standard and the line of, if you're the medical, the senior medical sergeant or communications sergeant or weapons sergeant or engineer sergeant, your job is to, be the subject matter expert, but your job is to train the other members of the team, to cross-train deeply. Even the captain, not expected to do exactly everything that they do, but expected as the officer to have a basic understanding. Everybody had to put those radios into operation. Everybody could shoot. Everybody had to call for fire. Everybody had to be able to help treat. Tactical combat casualty care was the standard of the day. Everybody had to be able to triage themselves or a teammate and help with casualties. So bottom line, because of that, we got into several situations where our Special Forces medics, particularly Steve, our 18 Delta, had to help triage. It was a mass casualty situation where we had, dozens of wounded. He would also help triage some of the civilians, or help treat them when he was able to. But his main role is to triage any one of the Americans and stabilize us for 24 to 48 hours until we can be evacuated. But he went above and beyond there. He was working with an Afghan medical doctor and what we loosely referred to as a medical unit that had some basic training and medical skills. We airdropped in a lot of medical supplies for them. And Steve to kind of cache and have and distribute bandages and things out to those units, and they had never had that level of tactical combat casualty care on the battlefield before, and it really kind of emboldened them. But there were several incidents where we helped triage casualties. I mean, it was austere and savage, Civil War medicine. I mean,
I can imagine.
Steve and the guys did incredible work in that with, Steve did field surgery. He was doing field surgery on some of those patients. And we would either assist with that or we're triaging the other patients around. We had another incident where, another day before this strafing incident we're talking about, where I was up with Paul's unit, and the Allied force, the militia force, received several bursts of PK machine gun fire. So they're just firing it in plunging mode, so they're just shooting for distance, and it impacted on some guys that were maybe 30 yards from me that were just taking a break, sitting against a wall. And, that burst of machine gun fire hit around him, and it struck one of them in the leg, and he kind of limped off. And, we got him bandaged up, got him taken care of, but then he had about a 4-hour donkey ride. I moved back to the main base camp, and then they brought him along later, and he showed up on a litter on top of a donkey, and then Steve, did surgery on him. But the casualties would then get, left with a village or whatever to recoup and recover, and then once we got into the city, they would go recover them with trucks and bring them in, where they then go to the clinic or the hospital and get some better care, in the city of Mazar-i-Sharif. But our biggest casualty incident was actually after this strafing incident, after we broke through their defenses on November 9th, when we had the battle at the pass just south of Mazar-i-Sharif, where they surprised us with the 4 volleys of BM-21 multiple rocket launch system, and they had stopped us in a canyon, mined it, had heavy machine guns covering the far side of it, and then once they got the assault force stalled in that, they surprised us with those rocket volleys. That's where we incurred the majority of our casualties and the wounded. And again, Steve and the medical element and the rest of the team was in action. I know our communications sergeant and our chief warrant officer were heavily involved in helping him in that particular incident. So,
Mark, I'll chime in on that. I will say it's something as even as a team sergeant and later as a company sergeant major, cross training is huge, and what we were able to do, what the team was able to do with your leadership, Paul's leadership, the knowledge, the institutional knowledge that the senior guys on this team had. You want to make yourself irrelevant in a good way, and that's when you look at us breaking down into 5 elements, whether it's from a medical, engineer, weapons, communications point of view. We had cross-trained so much leading up into this that it didn't matter what needed to be done. You could count on anybody to actually do whichever task needed to be done, no matter what the day, no matter what the circumstance. And when it came to the medical side, it was, like they said, it was, you're doing field surgery, and you either had Steve or Bill Bennett looking over your shoulder, giving you a class on actual field medicine, and doing things other than, hey, I'm just going to give an IV or whatever it may be. You're actually doing surgery, and they're talking you through the process.
Yeah,
So
those two
great
sergeants, when we came back, they went down to Fort Bragg to the Special Warfare, the medical school, and helped share those hard battlefield lessons as far as unconventional warfare, the medical aspects of being in that type of situation with austere medicine. And it changed. It evolved our program.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, like from a medical perspective, but then you also see it from just the TTPs you guys are developing in country, in CAS, paid it forward, or not paid it forward, but paved the way for the modern day TTPs of CAS, I really think.
One thing, sorry, I was trying to remember. There was one more point, and Mark was talking about it. It's something that happens in Robin's age. have no clue what phase it is nowadays, and the Special Forces Q course. But back in the day, it was phase 3. But the ethical dilemmas, it goes back to putting the commander on the helicopter if it lands. Great training, and I would say to a person on 595, the dilemmas that we were put through, actually, it goes straight back to Rob and Sage and the training we did. It was quite similar, and to name a day, you're actually reliving, the training we went through.
That Mike, that's a really great point. And I guess a question for the room. So you're saying with Rob and Sage, what you saw on the battlefield, Rob and Sage prepared you for. I guess for you guys, and then for the 213, Nate, chime in too, from an intel perspective. Did you guys, once you're in combat, you're doing this day to day, did you feel like the training you had leading up to this was enough, or was it kind of like, all right, we're going to play a little pickup ball here, we'll establish the rules, and now moving from kind of this point on, once we have this battle, this flight underneath us, that's where we really start building the TTPs and learning from there? Kick it off to anybody who wants to answer that.
Sure, I'll take it from the 213 side. This was really our chance for us to shake out some of the systems and things. As Nate mentioned, we got a bunch of, we were still playing with the quote new toys that we had there very often. And we had the standards, as Mike and Paul and Mark had mentioned, we knew how to do 9 lines. We knew how to do close air support. We knew the standards there, but to innovate in and around those was really key. Somebody was mentioning fusing earlier. Well, when you arm us up with laser guided bombs, we can't jump out of the jet and put new proximity fuses on those, right? So you kind of got to take to the battle what you got. And we were not great at hitting moving targets with laser guided bombs, but we started to figure out how to lead a moving target about one time a fall, pitch it out there, and then lays. And so we got really creative, especially butting up with our Hornets. The Hornets had some great strengths and weaknesses. The Tomcats had great strengths and weaknesses. But when you put them together and got, say, 2 sections of Hornets with Laser Maverick all loaded up, and you had a Tomcat that could find and laze and kill stuff that the Hornets couldn't see, you had a nice, ammo dump truck that you could bring with you into a strike package. Even working together with the Predator. We did that a couple times out there where we would use the great comm suite, marking, all those type of things to work with those folks. And then, just playing around with the systems. Like I mentioned, we had some really precision targeting in the Tomcat version of the Lantern, and we had a 40K laser. So we started getting really good at we would find a convoy, use our laser guided bombs to take out the lead vehicles, the end vehicles. Everybody would scatter, and they'd leave these convoys sitting there. And then we'd bring in B-52s and just generate coordinates for them for GPS guided weapons, JDAM, wind correct munition dispenser, things like that. So to some degree, we were using standards, pre-existing joint tactics, techniques, and procedures, JTTPs, but we were also innovating and making things up as we went along.
Yeah, Taco, I would say, and Biff and Tung confirmed this, I don't think there was ever any exercise where an F-14 or any naval tactical aircraft was providing targeting information to a B-52. That was stuff that was like made up during mid-rats, in the forward wardroom, on a napkin. I'm like, we can send in the air, JDAM or good enough coordinates for the B-52s to plug into their JDAM and execute. That I don't think had ever, I'm 98.98% certain that had never been done before out in Nellis or any other range. And that was all made up during the opening weeks of OEF.
Gotcha. And then for the 595 perspective, you guys were a little bit more savvy, obviously, with CAS and fighting and kind of what you said with the moral dilemmas being pitched forward. Was this just kind of another roll with the punches, or was some of this very much the same of like, yeah, we were prepared for this part, but now we're innovating once we get on deck? And is that just kind of how it always goes with what you guys see?
big thing is that there was about 4 of us that had been in SF for over 10 years. We had pretty much done just about everything we were doing before, multiple times. So barring the one time with the casualty, most of the other stuff we had either trained or actually done it for real. Myself and Andy Marshall were like the 4th vehicle to cross over the border with the Pan-Arab Division during the first Gulf War, working with the Kuwaiti Army, the 35th Brigade Kuwaiti Army. So this was very much like that, where we were calling in CAS at that time for them, and helping train, advise, and assist them in combined arms breaching. So it was, for the older guys, we'd all done and seen this before. For Mike, who this was one of his first combat deployments, he was getting institutionalized into it.
Yeah, there was
What was that last part, Mike?
So that's a case of beer for me. You know, I gotta make sure I provide a case of beer first time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know if you had that tradition in the Navy, but on that particular team, the part of that culture was if it was the first time you had done X with that team, regardless of rank, it was your turn to buy beer when we got back to the team room. So, back to the culture of this team though, and some of the advice we got before we deployed. I don't remember if I touched on this in a previous segment of episode that we did, but we had General Lambert come in. He was the SF commanding general, and he came to Fort Campbell, right, just like the day or two before we deployed. And he, what's he going to say to the handful of teams in the room that we knew we were the first going to be going? But it's like, man, you gotta figure out what's going to kill you today, and work to mitigate that. And every day, and that was very much part of what we did throughout the entirety of that mission. And whether you're working in a 3-man cell or a 2-man cell, or the rare opportunity where we had 6 of us together, or even more incredible, having 12 or 14 of us together, which there was only a couple points out of that first month or so that we were all together, is the Army's, they call it the after action review process. And we'd sit down and go, man, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What nearly killed us? How do we make sure we don't do that again? And who else needs to know this? And we would put that in routine traffic, or we'd verbally brief it if it was really urgent, to share those lessons, because it literally was, what's going to kill you today? Okay, Taliban rockets, mortars, machine gun fire, landmines. A horse that wants to kill you or buck you, or your horse is going to run off a cliff in the case of Sergeant Summers. Or most certainly, how do we make sure that lovely aerial armada overhead us doesn't kill us, or our partners? And what are the techniques that we are using to safely employ that CAS? And I think, Nate, something you touched on here in our training, when we do requal, it's one system. It's one F-18, or it's one A-10, or an F-16. We had never touched or talked to a B-52. I don't think Special Forces had called close air support since from a B-52 since the 70s in Vietnam or Laos, Cambodia or something, on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But we rarely had the opportunity to bring even dissimilar aircraft together from the same service, let alone a joint. There's not that many exercise opportunities to do that. And so there was definitely a lot of innovation in what we were trying to do on the ground with the the tactics and procedures, and how do you employ the munitions. They never let us use bombs in proximity fusing in training. Never. Let alone it was always impact, let alone delay or see what those effects would be. on the range. A lot of times the range restrictions didn't allow it, or to my knowledge, it didn't. But to mix those in, those techniques. But we know as a result of what we did, it led to, we're one of the rare SF teams that got to JTACs attached. A lot of the other ODAs that came after us, they got one JTAC attached to them. There just simply wasn't enough of the Air Force Special Operations JTACs to go around. And so I've been told that's another major reason why Army Special Operations and Air Force Special Operations got together and they created the Special Operations Tactical Air Controller course, the SOTAC course at Hurlburt Field. And, they run that. That course was run by JTAC instructors to put guys like Mike or myself or other Special Forces sergeants. A lot of time it defaults to our communicators to go through and get this additional skill set and background. And I know how we train that in Army Special Forces is different than how the Navy SEALs train their JTACs up at Fallon and their program, and it's different for how the MARSOC Marine Raiders train their JTACs as well. But there's a shortage of them, and it's become, to me, they're one of the most deadly individuals on the battlefield, and every team needs to have at least one subject matter expert, and every guy on that team needs to be able to do that basic common employment of fires and make that critical call in case that subject matter expert is killed or injured.
Mark hit on something that we really haven't mentioned is we're on the ground and they had the airborne command unit. We called them Kmart. And the aircraft would check in with Kmart and we would talk to Kmart and you guys would get forwarded to us. Every flight that came in when we did our initial check-in with them and they checked in with us, there was often a dialogue on what kind of coordinates are we using? Are we using GRMS? Are we using lat long? Are we using GPSs? Are we using I forget the different terms, but there was that we had to iron that out with every flight that came in because we would send something up and they'd go, well, you need to fix that for me. And I understand you guys are in a fighter jet doing a lot of things where you're flying and you can't do some knob turning and stuff. So we'd end up have to pull out our GPSs or our map and change from military grid reference to lat longs. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not for us.
Sometimes under fire as well.
Yeah, it was that little Garmin GPS Vista that I talk about that runs on AA batteries that we all had. You got very familiar with the format, to be able to quickly, I say quickly, it still probably took a minute or more, which is a lifetime under fire. But I got to switch it from a military grid reference system to, good Lord, it's been a minute, latitude, longitude, but in degrees, minutes, seconds, right? That the Air Force wants. But then, if I remember right, the Navy and Marine Corps, you want it in degrees, minutes, decimal point, right? And so we would have to switch the coordinates back and forth on occasion, depending on who was overhead. Little things. And then now, again, we're the cavemen. You're using orange panels and even mirrors, flashes. We got into a situation in an urban environment that Abe, who Chip met with me this weekend, Abe's tie to this team was his aircraft were the first urban cast strike for us at danger close in an urban environment. And that call, anyway, is a whole nother episode. So there we go. But where I'm going to go with this is we're doing everything we could to mitigate the risk to our team on the ground, the risk to our allies. And get that ordnance as quick as we could where we needed it to affect, achieve strategic effects on the battlefield against, when we're outnumbered, outgunned. So I appreciate all those pilots that came overhead, even the ones that Mike and I may have yelled at on occasion on the radio. But your SAM report, I don't know if we covered this before. I remember one particular incident from an OP where, Vince had been on the radio trying to get an aircraft to cycle in, and Vince asked me to get on the radio as the actual and try to get this guy to come down. He wouldn't even come close to the hard deck, right? He had it padded with, let's say, +10. And I'm like, dude, come down to +5 or +3 from your hard deck and you're gonna see this target. And we needed him urgently, and I'm watching the battlefield as it's unfolding and that target's exposed that I need him to strike, and they wouldn't come down. And I got mad. I said, just go away. You're out of here. Next. Cycle in the next sortie. After I'd pled with this pilot to come down, your buddies have come down prior to you. We've been destroying enemy targets all day here from this observation post, and we need your support, and we need it now. And he was like, oh, there's SAMs, there's RPGs, whatever. I'm like, dude, I know he's not worried about RPGs, but he was worried about air defense. And I'm like, there is no radar systems that we have seen. We have been here at that point. I think we were we were at least 7 to 10 days in when that incident occurred. And I'm like, we have not seen one single surface to air missile. And then I think I said the words that no pilot ever wants to say. I was so frustrated. I was trying to encourage him. I'm like, look, if they do shoot one at you, and, go east and eject, and our militia force will pick you up. That's friendly territory to the east. Nobody wants to hear that. But I told that guy to go away because we were in a battle and I needed that ordnance employed immediately. And I knew there was another set holding it at the IP, and sent them out. And guess what? Those fellows obviously were listening because they had no problem. The next group that came in came right down, employed their munitions, and we got on about what we needed to do. But I appreciate you. I enjoyed meeting you this weekend, Chip. Look forward to seeing you guys at some point again. I'm going to yield.
Hey, Mark, that's a great point. It goes back again to that cross training when you talk about going from grid to lat long. It was something that we actually did in our JSET in Kuwait. I remember clearly. It's I don't even know how it came about, but we did probably about 4 days of converting to lat long and doing that training, and it came in very handily. And I will quote, Ferris Bueller, as you talk about guys going below deck, be a man and take some Pepto-Bismol. Just get below deck and do what you need to do, because I don't care what the hell was on the ground. No one was going to hit you. So, we're getting fired at. Be a man and or a woman and do what needs to happen. At least that was in my eyes. And of course, that's why I can't talk on the radio, because I say things like that and I get myself in trouble with people. So. But, again, that's where that cross training really came in, and doing those things that you never know when you're going to use it, but actually learning how to convert from grid to lat long was huge, doing that earlier in 2001.
I think that's a really good point, guys. And then one thing to, you see it throughout, and Beth and I have talked with multiple people and guests where it's just being a professional, knowing whatever your platform, whatever your weapon system, and knowing it to a T. And then once you know it, think about, well, how can I use this in expanding different ways? And it's those people who have thought about that before. And you guys, like you just said, Mike, I don't know, why wouldn't we use grid? I mean, now we're all using grid. But for you guys, it's I have to know all three, because now I have to be concerned with Air Force platforms. And when I think of the stacks you guys probably were managing with the different type of ordnance as cross-train, it just really comes down to being a pro and being a professional, and then how do I solve this problem? And that knowledge is what unlocks the creativity, I think, and that's really important.
Hey, Taco, it's actually interesting. I'm as a lessons learned analyst here at SOCOM, I'm supporting what's going on in Iran, and it'll be interesting to see, as what you guys were able to do 25 years ago to what these pilots are doing nowadays, and how it's evolved over time. I am just waiting to see some of the things that's going on, and how we've progressed, and what the future holds. It's truly amazing what a lot of these service members are able to do nowadays. It was, we put the stepping stones in place to where they're at now, and hopefully we could share those lessons here shortly with the greater community.
Yeah, that's incredible. I feel like this is a good time because I know we're coming towards the end of when everybody has time tonight, where we can kind of wrap things up and talk about how the deployments ended for each of you, and then kind of go around the horn and talk about what everybody took away from this deployment. Because as we talked about before we started recording, this was a really incredible time in American history to be involved in. And I mean, I can't even imagine losing 20, 25 pounds on the ground. Just the amount of stress, the amount of importance of what you were doing. So I guess to start out with, let's go to 213. How did the rest of the deployment carry through for the next, it was about a month a month and then some change, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, we had to change the command. I left, and it was a planned change of command. I left the first week of December. And it was tough. It was tough to leave the team that, I'd been with for just over 2 years. And but left them in good hands. Gandhi and Bag Hefty, God rest his soul. Um, were great guys, great team, and obviously, you see the crew, from Tung, Nate, that we had to work with was spectacular. I think the one thing, the lessons learned, and we, my biggest concern the entire cruise was to have somebody hurt on the flight deck or lose somebody in an airplane, um, or frag somebody on the ground, to where, a blue on blue or whatever occurrence. And, we were our greatest threat. We were the only guys over there dropping bombs from 30,000 feet and strafing from, low altitude. But that really was the biggest concern that I had from my position as a skipper at the time. I'm sure it was the same for the guys who took over after I left. And again, they turned right around and went back into Iraq. So it was bittersweet going home for me, and watching the rest of the war from a leather chair. Not quite, but it was a very difficult time. Very, very exciting time, very proud time for me, but it was difficult to leave, to be honest.
For sure. And it wasn't because you had broken the hard deck so many times that they had to take you off the schedule. Could you talk about that real quick? Like how you got taken off the schedule?
TC and I had a great relationship. We were in a previous air wing together. When the door was closed, it was TC and Biff. But there was two other instances where, and I think Tung was with me, where we went below the hard deck. And he must have played that scene on Top Gun over and over, because he ended up throwing a bottle of water or a pitcher of water at me, as I'm standing there. And he took me off the schedule. Of course, I wrote the schedule, so I put myself back on. But he was a great guy. We had a great relationship. It was a trying time, and he had a lot on his plate, and as we all did. But the hard deck, for some of the things that we had to do, you just couldn't be effective. Yeah, we had a 40K laser, but there were things, weather or things, we were dropping dumb bombs. I think there was one pass up there. There was a train or something or a convoy. We were bombing with dumb bombs, and Tony's like, "You gonna pull out?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure."
Well,
Eventually,
I can talk to that.
yeah, I'm
They
sure you
mentioned
can,
it.
Tom. Over to you.
Yeah, they mentioned the missile threat, and we get complacent in altitude. You'd literally look down, see a handheld shot at you. I remember eating a breakfast burrito one day and not even putting out flares because we were up high enough. You could see them, and they looked just kind of like an unguided bottle rocket, and then they just trail off. We knew they couldn't reach us up there. But when you would go down, those things would guide. And I think that's one of the days Biff was just alluding to. We were out there one day with 2 laser guided bombs and 2 dumb bombs, on the same aircraft. And we ran upon a convoy, and first we used the laser guided bombs. So I did my thing, took out the lead vehicle, took out the trail vehicle, and now it's pilot time. And I have no control over the dumb bombs. It's all pilot. You point and you shoot, and the Tomcat, when it rolls in, the GPS antenna is up on the top, and sometimes it would mask that antenna in the weapon impact. You kind of the thing you're aiming with would jump around for a little bit, and then it would stabilize. So Biff rolls in with the first dumb bomb, and he's targeting a vehicle, and he pulls off, and like he misses, like wasn't even close miss. I was like, dude, like you suck. Which, by the way, never tell Biff that in the cockpit. So we roll in the second time, and we're in the shoot, and we're in the shoot, and we're in the shoot, and I'm like, dude, you need to pickle. And we're still in the shoot, and he finally pickles. Well, he's waiting for that whip to steady up nice and good because he's going to bullseye this thing, which he did. And as he pulled out, because we were way below the hard deck at that point, I looked back, and it wasn't one of these bottle rocket out in the middle of nowhere missiles. It was a handheld guiding on us because they fly real straight and true, and they pull lead. So it was definitely tracking on us at that point. And I put out a buttload of flares, and he put out a buttload of flares. And as soon as we did, that thing just took a turn right behind us into the flare stack. And of course, I'm like, "You see that handheld?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I saw it. I put out flares." Says, "Yeah, so did I." And I was able to rewind the tape and look at how low we went. And we were well below the hard deck, I think, at that point. And that's probably the tape that got him a pitcher of water thrown at him. But just to piggyback on what he said, the biggest thing, we were conscious of the threat when we went down there. We knew as long as we sold the stuff or put out flares, we were going to be fine unless it was a magic bullet. We weren't worried about it. My biggest concern was frankly dropping bombs on friendlies. It's the forward air controller dilemma. When you're doing close air support, guys are in a fight. If you get in there too quickly and you don't understand the situation on the ground, you don't have good situation awareness, and you act too quickly, you can do some really bad stuff. Conversely, if you act too slowly and are too methodical and take way too much time and are too risk averse, those guys are in firefights and they're potentially dying as well. So you've got to balance that. Do I have confidence that I know what the situation on the ground and can I act? But you can never wait until you're completely certain. And that was probably the biggest thing the rest of the deployment. I'll say this, a good month for a Tomcat guy on deployment was, hey, if you got 20 hours of flight time, you had a pretty good month. Even though we didn't start flying in hostilities to the 7th of October, I flew 101 hours. I just looked at it in my logbook in October, and I flew 106 hours in November. I mean, we were just going and going and going and going as much as we could stand. I remember flying with a rolled up towel for lumbar support. My back hurt so bad sitting in the jet, which probably wasn't a good idea. But I just remember we flew as much as we possibly could, and we knew what was going on. We were there to support the land war and the guys on the ground. And as I mentioned in a previous episode, without their eyes on, once you got to a certain part in the war, there was very little that we could affect once things started to get mixed up. And you're going after the people type mobile target sets.
Yeah, you'll get a kick out of this. I bet Tung was probably in worse shape than he had been riding a horse for a month, riding in the back seat with me.
Hey guys, what you said you referenced your flight logs. What was your like kind of average duration of a day? I've heard 10 to 14 hours. Is that true? 10 to 14 hours in a cockpit?
Not airborne. I
Okay.
mean, I can go back and look at it right now and tell you.
I
I think we were triple
Typically
cycling or quadruple cycling.
8, 9
Yeah.
hours, right?
8 or 9.
Yeah. Yeah. So the typical, particularly going up to meds, the typical mission was 8, 9 hours. One of my stateroom mates, kid Braddock, his wife sent him out a bunch of Girl Scout cookies, and he would keep in his flight suit a sleeve of Thin Mints, and he would, eat one every 15 minutes, during his, that's how he would space out the mission. But it was about 9 hours.
Hey, you're gonna make Mike upset. He was coveting. He killed a guy over an MRE with some peanut butter. We're up there eating Thin Mints.
Hey, there's nothing better than Thin Mints. Let me tell you right now. Those Thin Mints are awesome. Just gotta eat them and just spread them out over time.
And they
I
fit
feel like we should
perfectly
all
in a
send a
flight.
box to Mike of Thin Mints.
Can you touch on? Can you
Yeah.
finish this up for the 213
Yeah,
guys?
I had the luxury, emphasis on luxury, of being able to see, the big picture from kind of start to finish, from the initial targeting and strategy development. When you think about combatant commands and their job to fight as a joint force, there's an O plan for pretty much every scenario. There was no O plan for this. Everything was a pickup game. Everything was writing on the fly, so to speak. And, we talked about, Taco, you touched on this, and everyone else touched on this. We all had our training, but you take that training, and that's just the foundation. Everything is innovation, after that, right? Like, all right, how do we use B-52s from the air, providing coordinates from a Lantern on an F-14 Tomcat to support special forces, given their payloads. Never been done before, made up in between 8-9 hour missions, right? So these guys launch, they come back, we debrief, and during the debrief, or again, usually in the wardroom while eating, sorry, Mike, we were talking about what do we need to do differently? How do we need to innovate? How do we stay inside the enemy's ODA loop, right? And so, when you think about it, Afghanistan is about the size of Texas. And our carrier Wing 11, Carl Vinson, we arrived on station in the Northern Arabian Sea the end of September 12th, 2001. More or less where we were going to be until mid-December when we departed the area and relieved by the TR. And when you think about the size of Texas, the max amount of U.S. troops on the ground between October and November was about 2,000. All in. I mean, that includes Objective Rhino, which was an airborne assault using, even that was only 200-300 Rangers, right? So
I think your number's high, Nate. I think it's really high for October, November, but I'll let you go on that one.
Well, that is everything that could be, anyone that put a boot on the ground, during that time, even if it's Rhino, in and out. The point is that it was such an extreme, we use the term asymmetric warfare, to be able to start in October, and by the end of December, everything was pretty much cornered in Tora Bora. That's when our aircraft carrier left. Tora Bora was, mid-December of 2001. And if you think about that, the country the size of Texas, a very small footprint of American boots on the ground, swept through. It was quite a sight to see that. For me, it was personally really neat. Once when we kind of got past the initial phases, it was cool going down to the different shops on the carrier and giving a sanitized version of what's going on. These kids, a lot of them are kids, were just cranking away. No idea the big picture. It was fun kind of saying, hey guys, this is where we're at now. Here's where the flot is, here's where the line of troops is. Here's the ground that we're taking, and here's why we're doing it. That was a really cool experience to be able to take those 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids in the PR shop and the ordies, whatever, and be able to share the big picture of what was going on. And
now they just watch it on Fox and CNN.
Right. We didn't have any of that.
Hey
How about
guys, I wanted
from?
to ask I have a
Mhm.
serious question though. Was Top Gun 2 really based off of Biff and Tung going into Iran and recovering the last F-14? You know?
Uh, no, it wasn't, but I laughed audibly out loud when I saw them get in the Tomcat, and the dude looks back at all the circuit breaker panels. That was the most realistic part of both of those movies.
Yeah, the second movie I thought was better than the first. And to be honest, I went to see it with my daughter, and honestly, I had a tear in my eye when I saw the Tomcat.
Sure, I'm sure you probably feel a little emotional knowing the last flying ones of those have probably been destroyed the last few weeks. But
It's too bad they weren't airborne.
That was mercenary. But also, yes. So from the ground perspective, can we really quickly wrap up? And I've told you guys I'd love to have you on my other podcast to talk about the rest of this deployment in detail if you would like. But just for tonight, I think if we can talk about how that deployment ended, getting into Mazar, going from horseback to being in vehicles, what that was like for the rest of your deployment.
I'll start. As Paul or Mark alluded to with the BM-21 strikes and that whole incident, and then going into Mazar-i Sharif, one thing I will always remember, and I remember telling my mother this. I don't know, Mark, Paul, if you remember when we went to Dostum's place, we had dinner, and we were all in vehicles. They had security, but people were lined up in the street. And I remember getting out of the vehicles, and I told my mother I felt like one of the Beatles because people were actually just so happy. They wanted to touch you and say thank you for the job we had done to rid them of the Taliban and everything else. Of course, I'm skipping a lot going from the Tangi Pass all the way into Mazar-i Sharif, but one of the things I will truly always remember is that part of getting out of a vehicle to have dinner with Dostum, and people just wanting to touch you and say thank you for the job collectively that we had done. I will also say great mentors, Paul, Mark, something that I tried to infuse later on. As a young SF guy, whether you're a weapons sergeant, engineer sergeant, comm sergeant, what have you, you have to be able to see a bigger picture. You're just not one of the, just not a weapons sergeant or engineer sergeant. You have to be able to see a bigger picture, especially in that environment. And talking to Paul, Bob Pennington, Andy, Mark, and getting that knowledge from that perspective, a special forces perspective, the job you're supposed to do, no matter if you're a 18 Zulu as Paul, a team sergeant, Mark as a team leader, or me as a junior weapons sergeant, the responsibilities that you have, you're required to see a bigger picture, and looking back at that now and what mentorship I received was huge, and guiding me, the rest of my career, and trying to help others see that you are just not that little weapon sergeant or what have you. You have to be able to understand that you have to see that bigger picture and what we are trying to do in the greater scheme of things.
After we have our little incident there, the main battle really starts the next day. and it starts with a bomb strike that takes out the major headquarters for the front line, and Dostum's men attack. Once that attack starts, it's kind of this crazy world we lived in, where literally every day you didn't know what you were going to be doing. From we walked and horseback rode for the rest of that day. We cleared we cleared the mud hut to have a place to stay in. Then next thing, we're linking up with the rest of the team at a big meeting where all the heads, all the tribal leaders meet and are discussing how they're going to attack. We get left behind. Me, Mike, and Matt were supposed to be the reserve. And in the middle of the night, it was just after dark, we get a phone call from Dostum via the CIA representative. He needed us at the front line. We're bouncing across the battlefield in a Gaz, the Russian Jeep, the Gaz, with me, Mike, and Matt stuffed in there with a Russian mafia guy driving. No idea where we're going. Next thing we know, we're walking up a mountaintop in the fog, can't see in front of our face, thinking we're going to walk into the enemy. The next morning, we bomb and clear the Tengi Pass for our guys. We get artilleried. Next thing, we're in Mazar Sharif at a 200-year-old fort, Kuala Jangi. Few days later, we're meeting all the tribal leaders in the northern area, with Dostum sitting down to make a government. We're doing patrols around, talking to people. My engineer is sent out to buy vehicles on the open market. I think you ended up going to Shebourgon. Then we ended up going to Kunduz, which was a Mad Max run across the desert. While we're halfway there, the prisoners at Kuala Jangi, let me stop. Before we left Mazar Sharif, as we're leaving Mazar Sharif, the Taliban showed up at Mazar Sharif to surrender. And suddenly there's news reporters standing in the middle of the road blocking the army. You're like, what the? Some female reporter standing in the middle of the road as the armored vehicles have to veer off the road to keep from running her over. And she's trying to get the perfect picture. Then the Mad Max run to Kunduz. We're at Kunduz. It's Mad Max run back. Next thing, back to Shebourgon, up to the prison. We get Johnny Walker Lynn, the American Taliban, and another American Taliban. A couple other things happen, but every day it was this adventure of, okay, what's going to happen today? What are we going to go be tasked with? Okay, do the best you can. And next thing, we're getting pulled out of Afghanistan to meet Mr. Rumsfeld in Uzbekistan and brief him. And one of the things I always remember is we briefed Rumsfeld, and right after we briefed Rumsfeld, a U.S. Army general who was the second in charge of the Pentagon at the time, he's a Fox News guy right now, General Keane. He showed up at our tent and we briefed him on what we had done. And he walked into this meeting, sat down, it was him and like two other guys. He walked in, sat down, crossed his arms he couldn't believe he was in the tent. Why was he listening to us? We briefed him on what we were doing. He stood up, looked at us and said, "I don't think so," and left. And we're like, I looked at Mark and said, "Well, what the hell was that?" And he leaves. I'm like, well, whatever. I could care less. He's not really in my chain of command. I'm over 20. I'm good. So he leaves, and like 4 hours later, we're woke up in the middle of the night in our tent, told, "You'll have your entire team out at the airfield on the runway. General Keene's coming back and wants your picture." And I'm going, what the heck for?
July
He had flown down.
January 1st.
Yep, he'd flown down to Bagram and been briefed by the command element at Bagram, and they confirmed what we had said. And he goes, oh, those were really the guys. I got to get a picture with him. He flew his jet in there the next morning. We're all out on the airfield at some ungodly time in the morning to stand there, wait for him to land, to stand in front of his jet to get his picture. Which is funny because, 3 or 4 months later, Mark, we went up to the Pentagon and we're in his office and he had that picture on his desk and we were briefing him again. It was a crazy world for a while there, right at the end.
I will
Can
say
I have one question? Was the female journalist Lynn O'Donnell? I've had her on my podcast. She was at Kali Jangi right in the beginning then.
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
All I know is that as she was standing there, I had this intention to run her over. And in her podcast, as she's talking, this Toyota vehicle drives back, and you can hear an expletive of "Get the hell out of the road, you!" And you can actually hear it on her thing as I zoom past. I'm screaming at her. She was literally holding up the army, and she doesn't understand that. For a little bit, we thought we were going to open fire on the Taliban and they were going to fire at us, and she was in between them, and that she was real close to being a casualty. And I don't think her and her cameraman hadn't, thought it was just, it's going to be a bunch of people drive by, I got to get the shot.
Paul, one thing I want to add too is, as you were talking about us being, you, Matt, and I being in the vehicle with the Russian agent and then going up the mountainside. One thing I will always remember, and us being in the military at that time, we got nothing for free. When you talk about wet weather gear, something to keep you warm, you actually had to pay for that stuff. And I remember once we got to where we were at, there's one of Mike's stories that goes along with my MRE ordeal. We finally get up there and it's like the heavens opened up. I don't know, it was like 40 degrees, 42 degrees, I don't know, but it just starts raining and pouring. And Paul and I are setting out defensive measures for the night. You got the pot shots from the Taliban coming all over the place. And I cannot believe I am dealing with this crap right now. I'm wet, I'm cold, we're putting stuff out. And I turn and look at Matt as I'm trying to find something to keep me warm. And I look over to, the 10 o'clock, and there's a Northern Alliance guy, fighter, with a trash bag over him with holes for his eyes. He's wearing rubber shoes, no socks. And he's just sitting there quiet. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just shut the hell up right now. The man is just sitting there sucking it up. And I'm complaining because, I don't have the proper wet weather gear or, something to keep me warm. And he's just sitting there with a trash bag over his body and not saying a word. So I always remember that, putting things in perspective from our point of view.
Well, I think maybe this is a good time to go around the horn and have everybody say final words about what it was like to be part of this really incredible time in American history. And I'm gonna let whoever wants to go first can be first. I know that that's like a very bad way to do this.
I'll go ahead. It was an honor, truly an honor. Working with, again, Mark, Paul, Bob, Andy, Bill, Steve, Vince, Will, all of them. It was truly an honor. I was a young guy. on the team, but I will truly remember everything we did, the mentorship, the training, the brotherhood that we had, and to this day, it was a job we had to do. People look up to it, look up to us, but it was truly an honor to work with you all and hear the stories, especially from the era of what you guys did for us, what we were able to achieve together. So from myself, thank you.
I'm going to keep with the theme here, starting with the lowest rank and work our way up. Since I'm the next lowest rank at that time, I concur with Mike. It was really great working when we were actually in combat, actually in the field doing things with the professionalism. When you guys signed, we talked in, we had our initial check-in with you guys, always professional, very professional, ready to do work, ready to do what you could do for us. And that was really good, really appreciate it. And outstanding. Thank you very much for coming in low for us. You don't always get that from the guy on the ground because it's on to the next thing. You don't oftentimes have a chance to say things. It was nice having all the professionalism around us at all times. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And Beth, if we're going to reverse rank order on 9/11, then I guess I'm next. I think we knew what happened was historic and what we were taking part in was historic. And I think for me personally, just to be able to be a very small part of something big, our country being attacked in the continental United States for the first time since the War of 1812, like that's a pretty big freaking deal. And to be part of that response, I think all of us were very attuned that we had just as competent, brothers and sisters who were not on point at the time, right? But that was our call. And as Tung said, I mean, we knew very, very soon that after the opening weekend change, planned targeting would shift to supporting small small groups of forces on the ground. And I think we only imagined what these guys were going through. And so I really appreciate you and TACO bringing us together to connect, a quarter of a century later, to have that, connection that was at the time ranging from thousands of miles away to, a few hundred feet away. So I think, again, I don't want to speak for my Black Lion brethren, but I think we were all very acutely aware that whatever it is we were doing and whatever new things we were doing was to make sure that these guys came home and were as effective as possible. And so it was an amazing opportunity, for lack of a better word, to learn and to be a part of that. So again, thanks for bringing us together, and for the ODA guys, thank you for all that you did.
Yeah, it was an honor to spearhead America's response to the 9/11 attacks, and there's no logical reason why we survived it except for our training and our faith in each other, and by the grace of God and our allies, and some aircraft overhead. You made the job easier. You saved lives. You saved American lives. You saved Allied lives. You are a voice on the radio that we don't always get to meet. And as I shared with Chip this week, deeply appreciate everything, not just you and Tung did, but your entire squadron, that entire air wing, the other aircraft carrier, there was, and that air wing, there was all those Air Force pilots that came over as well, whether they're dropping ordnance or lethal, non-lethal aid, humanitarian aid for us. Y'all contributed to that, and I love meeting people over the years that had a role, and I want to know, hey, tell me about your day during that. And it's been great to meet them, and I love listening to that, their perspectives of things, whether that was a guy that helped order saddles for us, or somebody that loaded parachute bundles that dropped lethal aid, or your armaments kids on that aircraft carrier. We couldn't have done that without them doing their job, or those mechanics, no doubt. But I just personally thank every one of those aviators from your squadron, your wing, and everybody that had a part of that, Nate, to help get them where they needed to be at the right time and place to employ those effects and help us energetically meet the enemies of our country and defeat them on the field of battle. But I'll leave you with this other comments of there was a defense case study that was done that showed we employed over 300 airstrikes in that month, between our team and then there was another special forces team that came in there, and with the help of those JTACs. That has not been done before. It's probably still a record, I'm sure. 80% of those airstrikes were called by special forces sergeants or officers. We got better. We adapted every day, tried to figure out what's going to kill us, because the battlefield changed. Mike and Paul just touched on that in a summary, and I'm happy to talk with you in more detail about that, Beth. I'm sure our team would be in another forum. But that case study was out in simulation. It's called the Campaign from Mazar-e-Sharif. We then were later asked to write a monograph about it that came out in 2021, that the Joint Special Ops University had us do, and it's titled the same, The Campaign from Mazar-e-Sharif. And, there's been a lot of books written about us, but we finally wanted to tell our own story, and we did that finally just 3 years ago with our book, Swords of Lightning, that came out, that was the team's perspective of that mission. But I look forward to finding a 20 millimeter barrel that I would like to have in our team bar. If you guys know where I can find one of those, maybe someday. But that's all I got for tonight with y'all. I want to listen to the rest of you got what you got, other than to say you are invited to the grand opening of the Horse Soldier Bourbon Distillery, July 3rd and 4th weekend in Somerset, Kentucky, on the 250th anniversary of America. I look to sharing a little sip of bourbon with you all at that. So thank you, Beth. Thank you, Taco.
Well, I guess I'm next up, and I'll say first and foremost, I just booked July 3rd and 4th. My wife will kill me, but I got to be out there for the opening of the Horse Soldier distillery. That's a great piece of Americana. Can't echo enough what Mark said. Just a privilege to serve in response to 9/11 for the country. Lots of reasons that many of us joined the military. A lot of them, mom, dad, apple pie, spirits, patriotism. But when the shit hits the fan, you're doing it for the people beside you, physically and metaphorically. We were able to go down there and do what we did because we know you guys would have done the same for us had the roles been swapped. So it's an incredible privilege to be able to support our brothers in arms on the ground there, and we truly maintain that perspective. We know, I never killed anybody over an MRE because we knew we had it pretty good. We were going back to the safety and the security and the air conditioning and the comfort of a ship every night. A little sporty getting aboard sometimes, that's a whole nother thing. But we were able to take a break, and we know that you guys weren't, and anything we could do to ease your burden or to support you guys that were truly out in the thick of it was an honor and a privilege. This is 25 years ago now, but looking back to it, some things in war don't change. What I think was absolutely critical to the success of everything that ODA 595 and triple nickel, and combining that with carrier air wings and Air Force, big wing tanking and heavy bombers and stuff, was simply letting the guys do the mission, give them the commander's intent, tell them what needs to be done, and then give them the authority and trust to make it happen. We'll make it happen. Even with in fact, I fear even more as communications, as sensors and technology advances, our leaders cannot lose the fact that the most lethal force is to put a good soldier, sailor, airman, Marine on the ground and tell him what needs to be done and let him do his business. We need to get some of the micromanagers out of the business of telling people what to do and then how to do it at a granular level. But I appreciate the trust that the nation put in us at that time to get things done.
I think it's all been said. Was very thankful to have the opportunity to meet Mark this weekend. It really came full circle. Our job at the time was supporting your team on the ground, and I think seeing, having met Mark and know 25 years later, we're responsible, for making sure we had a part in making sure you guys were able to do your job and successfully complete your mission. And again, the reality of this whole podcast and getting together with this team has just been a very special time in my I'd still call it military career, even though I'm retired. Um, I look forward to, I'm putting it on my calendar as well. The 3rd and 4th, we'll all get together and raise a glass for those who didn't come home. But I'm thankful that this group is all here together and really appreciate this opportunity, Beth, Taco. Just be thankful for Magic Carpet. Makes it a lot easier coming back after a long 9-hour mission. But we'll explain that to you guys in July, what that's all about. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it.
I just want to thank all of you for letting us hear this story that I think no one else has gotten to hear in this kind of detail. And so it just feels like an incredible honor and privilege to have heard from each of you and get such a unique perspective on this really important part of a war that, I still remember where I was in November of 2001 and September 11th. And it's amazing to know that you all were out there making sure that we were all protected back home. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all of this. It's been really maybe one of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Can I give one parting note?
Yeah.
Last week, I was at work and a ODA was out there working with me, and their leadership pulled me aside and said, because they think they might actually be going off to Iran. They have no orders, but they're thinking they might have to go. And they asked me point blank, hey, Paul, what did you guys do to get ready to go to Afghanistan? So I pulled these young leaders off to the side and explained what we had done for years to get ready to go. And then gave him pointers on, if you got a short bit of time, use it. Even though you don't know if you're going or not, use every minute of it to get ready. And I thought that kind of ties it all together, where they're still asking us old guys how to get ready for the next one.
Yeah, that's well said. And I think I would just like personally from, 17-year-old me, as you guys were doing this, it is absolutely a reason why I'm here. It was a log on the fire hearing your guys' story back home. Is I wanted to do it, but then seeing it in action and seeing it close up really ignited that fire. So thank you guys. I am humbled and honored to have you guys here and to have the story. And Paul, I couldn't have summed it up better than what you just said of, these stories are so important, and how we keep making quality warriors and keep doing quality work is the fact that we keep moving these lessons learned forward, and we keep reaching back to those people who have done it before and say, hey, how do I do this? And so, yeah, just want to, thank you guys for everything. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And I want to thank everybody who took the time to listen with us, and we'll see you back next week.